Hey, from Bug Eye Guy, come see our collection of fuel tanks. They all have something to teach us. These are kind of all important things that we want to look at when maintaining and living with all these Spridgets, whether it's a later midget or a Sprite, and even many other British cars of this era. This is important stuff. First of all, sender gaskets, incredibly important. A lot of them are cork. We use the Viton gasket. That's what we sell. When you fill up the tank, the fuel hits effectively the top of this whole box, or the ceiling if you will, and runs right out through that gasket if you don't have a good seal. And then it sits in this well underneath the trunk floor. Remember, on many vehicles you have an access hole. On a Sprite you don't. So you have to drop the tank to get at this. And you want to make sure you have a really good seal at the sender gasket. That's a key point. The second thing I want to show you that's kind of interesting is these unions here for the pickup line. We've had some people have problems with this, and it's very important to know how this works. Here's the nipple that goes in here. Excuse me while I grab it with my other hand. This little nipple is a broken off fuel line. This is an original one. Here's the one that we sell. And this comes attached, soldered to a copper pickup line. And that nipple has to make a good seat here. It has to seat against the fitting inside there, which is the mate to this. And you should just be able to see it. It is the opposite of this cone. And you should also be able to see here there's a ring where it's been seating on there for the last 60 years. It's then held in place by this nut. And all this nut has to do is hold the two pieces together. It doesn't have a very difficult job to do. The seal is made between the ring and the nipple, and if those are in good condition, you shouldn't need a whole lot of torque. Now, of course, people have problems. There are burrs or there's rust in there, and they then get this nut in here and they over tighten it and deform things. And you can see, hang on, mister, losing a piece. There it goes. You can see this is deformed right here, and that's because people have been over tightening it. So you shouldn't have to over tighten it. Excuse me while I fish up this nipple. Thank you. You shouldn't have to over tighten this to get a good union, and it has to be right, otherwise you can have a leak. So we've had cars where they'll leak down the inside. We've also had cars where they'll leak on the outside. The fitting has to be right, the threads have to be right, the tank has to be right. Here's a brand new tank that we're selling. Now this is made in China. It's not the prettiest workmanship, sadly, but that's what we can get. And in here you should be able to see at the bottom of this thread is another one of those little mates. You can get a good image. It's a different plane. You see the threads going down and then the little tapered area below it. And that's where that new fuel line, which I'll grab, excuse me, that new piece right here will mate. It mates whether the nut is in the picture or not. Okay, makes sense. It has to be centered, and it has to press against its companion in there for a good seat. And then the nut screws in on top to close it. It's very straightforward, but again, oftentimes we're finding people have trouble with this. Now, here's another reason why. On this tank, you can see the seat there. It's actually silver, and it's on the outboard side at the base of the threads. And then a little further down you see what's a cut pipe. And what that is the pickup line inside the tank where it unites with this bung. And we've had some of those part. Now on this tank, which is, I don't know when this was made, 70s, 80s, 90s, it's a reproduction tank. It was here in our building. This one, it's not such a clean union. You gotta kind of jiggle it to get it away from the seat, partly because it's not fully threaded. So you have all of these opportunities for problems. The other thing that can happen is that cut pickup line in there that you see can break away from the fitting if it's over tightened, if it's smashed, if it just rusts away. And then what happens is when you get below half a tank, you don't get any fuel anymore. So you run out of gas at half tank. So that's not pretty either. So your best bet is to make sure you have a good tank. This is a new one we're selling. We've had no issues with these, even though again it would be nice if the workmanship was a little bit better. These have a drain plug at the bottom, which is an Allen fitting. I've had a few people call us and say there's no drain plug here, but it's actually an Allen screw that will remove that, an Allen wrench that will remove that screw, I should say. And here also you can see on this tank, this one was all welded back together. Pretty amazing what we all used to do in the 70s. Now you would probably just buy a tank. This was a lot of work, not just to mention that it's on a gas tank, so it's particularly hard to do without blowing up. But anyway, people know how to do that, that's fine. They get rusty inside, which you look inside the sender hole. It's a little difficult on this video to see. It's pretty scaly metal, but this tank way outlived its useful life, and thus it is here in our graveyard. Here's another one that's interesting that we're throwing away, that this guy used a pipe thread fitting and an adapter to make his union for the pickup line. And this one might have also been leaking here. A lot of times water will just sit on the tank. It's kind of interesting. We've had a couple of tanks that look brand new on the outside, but there'll be pinholes because you'll get a bubble of water just sitting on the bottom of a tank, of course with the fuel on top of it, and it stays put. The car is sitting for years and it's just happily rusting away, and then you get a pinhole and you have a leak. Anyway, that's a bunch of information about fuel tanks. I want to encourage you to make sure, if and when you take this apart, that you thoroughly inspect both ends of this union. Make sure you have the right pieces. We sell these parts in our catalog. Happy to send them to you. A good clean fuel supply is so critical. Obviously, if you have rust in your tank, you're clogging your float bowls and your filters, you can have run and drivability problems, and we want to help you avoid that here at Bug Eye Guy.